They said we were extinct. The scream started when our ships arrived. No one had spoken the name Earth in over the centuries. The galaxies that once held it in memory now called it the Cinder, a ghost world, bombed into a glassy silence during the Purge Wars, one of a dozen human homeworlds wiped out by the Ascendancy, the ruling power of the Orion Arm. What remained of the species scattered like ash on solar winds, 101s and 2s forced underground, into ruins, into silence. The Ascendancy declared victory, but in the outer dark, far beyond the map jumped Carters. A human child named Kellen Rourke was born in the belly of a derelict station, iron-blooded, star-starved, forgotten. The station was called Cauldrons. Edge, a dead mining platform wrapped in asteroid rings and cloaked by a decaying quantum rift. The power grids groaned with age, and the hydroponic systems coughed out more mildew than food. Life there wasn't measured in years. It was counted in air filters and radiation alarms. But it was hidden, and that made it sacred. Kellen's first memory was of silence. Not the silence of space, that was eternal and expected, but the silence of grief, of the mothers and fathers who refused to sing, who taught their children only in whispers, who pointed at faded murals of mountains and oceans and said, "This is who we were." He learned to walk beneath broken banners, learned to fight in gravity so low it made his bones scream, and he listened to the old veterans who had once served in Earth's last fleets. They were tired, hollow-eyed, but they whispered stories of defiance like prayers. The Ark never made it. They glassed Europa first. We had ships that could scream faster than light. Humanity isn't gone, just remembering. Kellen grew. He was different. Where others mourned, he burned. He trained in vacuum and void, in outdated simulators powered by jury-rigged fusion taps. He studied alien war doctrine pulled from stolen Ascendancy drones. He taught others, organized children born in silence into squads, into units, into a doctrine of ghosts. By 16, he was their commander. By 22, he was their general. The humans of Cauldron's Edge began calling themselves the Ashburn, those forged from the ruins, the embers of old worlds. They salvaged forgotten tech, learned how to stitch together stealth drives from reactor coils and scavenged neutrino bafflers. They trained not for glory, but for revenge. And then, it happened. A signal, weak, fragmented, alien, but unmistakable. A distress call, not human, but close, a slave convoy, broadcasting from the Helian Rift. And within it, voices, speaking broken Earth standard. Kellen stood in the command well, listening as a child's cry pierced the calm static. "Is anyone out there? Please." They said humans are extinct. He didn't speak. He didn't blink. He simply turned to his second-in-command, a grizzled, former engineer named Rhea Voln, and said, "Prepare the vultures. We break orbit in 1 hour." Rhea's eyes widened. "That's Ascendancy space. Patrol sectors, gun lines. We'll never make it." Kellen answered, low and cold. "Then we die loud." The hangar lit up like a dying star. For salvaged attack corvettes, nicknamed vultures, roared to life. Their hulls were ugly, asymmetrical monsters of rusted alloy, stolen drives, and human defiance. No fleet command, no diplomatic sanction, just vengeance, duct taped with warhead glue. As they cut through the rift wall, Kellen's voice rang across the strike net. "They've forgotten what we are. It's time we remind them." But on the edge of the Helian Rift, as they emerged, there was no convoy, just wreckage, corpses, dozens of slave transports, drifting, no power, no life, until one flicker, one ping, a signal embedded in the beacon, not a distress call, a trap. The Ascendancy had been listening all along. The stars around them ignited with warp fire, and from the void, 20 Ascendancy warships blinked into existence, sleek, black, covered in burnished silver that drank starlight. Kellen's HUD flared red. Rhea's voice cracked. "We're boxed? No exit." The calm sparked again, and an inhuman voice echoed through the black. "So, the rats still breathe. Let this be your final heartbeat, human." Kellen narrowed his eyes. He whispered something only the bridge crew could hear. They wanted ghosts. Well, give them haunted. He slammed the override on their stealth course and activated the Vulture's final protocol. The corvettes began to split, armor plating peeled, hulls unfolded, and from each wreck of welded steel, dozens of smaller craft, drones, fighters, breachers, spilled into space like a swarm of ash-born wasps. From the black, humanity screamed back. The Ascendancy captain floated at the center of his hollow tank, 3 crimson eyes narrowing as his command ship trembled beneath him. This is not possible, he hissed. Primitive vessels, no registered fleet codes. How are they coordinating this swarm? Outside, the void was fire and shadows. Kellen Rourke's vultures had become ghosts no longer. Their stealth was gone, traded for fury. Dozens of fighter pods, jury-rigged with stolen grav pulse thrusters and rail cannons, tore through the enemy's outer picket lines. The formation was wild, erratic, but not disordered. It moved with a terrifying, human rhythm. Unpredictable and hungry inside Kellen's cockpit, system screamed. His right display blinked sparks, coolant leak. His port side stabilizer was barely holding, but he grinned like a wolf on the edge of madness. They're not adapting, he muttered. They still think we're savages. Rhea's voice crackled through the comms. They're pushing. A flanking wedge, carrier class, 2 minutes out. What's the call? Let them. Kellen's eyes flicked over the sensor map, watching the wedge tighten. We bleed, but we bite. He punched a code into the sideboard, releasing the Spectres, 6 of the Ashborn's most volatile weapons, autonomous drones built from forgotten AI warbrains, powered by decaying Earth air-efficient cells, designed not to survive, but to scar the enemy's memory. They launched with 0 warning, streaking into the Ascendancy's flanking wedge. They didn't fire. They crashed, detonating in blinding pulses of M-Fury. Ripping holes in the carrier's deflection lattice, the Ascendancy fleet reeled. But the cost was brutal. Rhea's ship, Ashfall 1, was caught in the shockwave, spinning into a breach field. Kellen's HUD tracked her descent in silence, unable to help. Rhea, eject. He snapped. Static. Rhea, I'm not leaving my reactor. She coughed, voice fading. You got command now. Make it count. Then, silence. Kellen didn't speak. He didn't scream. He just stared as her signal blinked out like a dying ember, and for the first time in years, he felt something claw at the edges of his heart. Grief. But there was no time for grief. The Ascendancy ships regrouped, their commander regaining formation, now treating the Ashburn like a real threat. Energy torpedoes lanced through the black. 2 vulture wings were torn apart. Ashburn fighters scattered. Kellen's remaining squadrons pulled back into the asteroid field, ringing the rift. They weren't ready for this. Not a full fleet. Not yet. Kellen hissed through clenched teeth. He opened a secure line to his command network. All vultures, disengage. Full burn to fallback coordinates Sigma 7. One of his lieutenants protested, a young pilot named Darren. We can't retreat. They'll think we're broken. They already do, Kellen growled. But we're not here to win. Not today. We're here to remind them we exist. Now fall back. As his ship spun toward the dark, Kellen set the final override, planting hundreds of scorched mines behind their retreat vector. Moments later, as the Ascendancy gave chase, the mines detonated in a symphony of nuclear flame, not to destroy, but to blind, a smoke bomb for the stars, and in the chaos, the Ashburn vanished, scattering into the dark like sparks on the wind. 3 days later, in a fortress station orbiting Ascendancy Prime, the High Praetor of the Galactic Ascendancy stood with his hands clasped behind his back, staring at the playback. Primitive ships, kamikaze tactics, viral comms, no traceable command structure. But they destroyed the corvettes, 1 carrier, and crippled a battleship, the officer before him. A Lorithian strategist, Bo Low. We believe it was a fringe uprising, criminals, pirates. They used our standard. The Praetor's voice turned to stone. They called themselves Ashburn. The room fell silent. Another aide stepped forward. Their leader, human male, named Kellen Rourke. No genetic record in the citadels. Census estimated age, 30. Command style, decentralized guerrilla doctrine. We believe he was born post-purge. The Praetor turned, slow and cold. Impossible, sir. He's real. The Praetor leaned forward, studying the human's face frozen on the hull screen. Eyes lit with wrath, mouth bloodied, ship burning around him, smiling. He's more than real. The Praetor whispered. He's dangerous. Back in Cauldrons. Edge, Kellen returned to silence. Only a third of his strike team had made it back. The others were dead, scattered, or captured. The hangar reeked of heat scars and melted armor. The names of the fallen had already been carved into the steel walls, a tradition as old as the station itself. Kellen walked among the wounded, helped the medics, sat with the orphans. No speeches. just presence, until one child, a girl of maybe 9, walked up, clutching a shattered helmet. Rhea's helmet. Was she brave? The girl asked. Kellen crouched, eyes hollow. She didn't run. Will they come back? He paused. They will, and next time, we'll be ready. That night, alone in the command deck, he watched the stars. A small screen played Rhea's last log, a message she had set to deliver upon her death. Kellen, if you're seeing this, I guess my time's up. You always had fire, the kind we lost when Earth burned. Don't let it die. Don't become like them. Make them afraid to speak our name again. Kellen stared at the screen, then down at the star maps. He began marking systems, circling routes, estimating fuel, calculating war, because now the galaxy had remembered the humans. But that was only the beginning. The Ascendancy broadcast was meant to intimidate. It flooded every major commnet in the Orion Arm, a message encoded in shimmering silver, wrapped in ceremonial banners, and delivered with the cold eloquence of their supreme herald. The attack at Helion Rift was an aberration. The human insurgents are no more. Order endures. Silence has been restored. But in the dark corners of the galaxy, where the Ascendancies reached thin, the broadcast did something else. It awakened. Them, on a shattered moon called Dyros V, a mining crew paused, staring at grainy footage of a man who fought with fire in his eyes. On an old refugee ship adrift in the Pythian graves, a grandmother whispered to her grandson, "That's how we used to fight. That's how we lived," and in the blackened spires of Cauldron's Edge. Kell and Rourke studied every echo of that broadcast and smirked. They were afraid enough to lie. That meant they bleed. 2 weeks after Helion, the Ashburn grew teeth. Kellen had sent encrypted pulses through old resistance channels. Ancient beacons once thought dead, still buried in ice moons and derelict colonies. Some signals were never answered, but others flickered back, faint but alive. From Kestrel Forge, a hidden fabrication world orbiting a brown dwarf, came weapons, reclaimed railguns, plasma lances, and old Terran hull plating. From Arden 6, a former prison asteroid, came soldiers, scarred and ruthless, still wearing rusted ID bands from Ascendancy camps. From the ghost station Lyra's Wake, deep inside the forbidden black halo belt, came something more. Knowledge. Kellen stood in the deep vaults of Cauldron's Edge, watching as Rhea's surviving engineers laid out what they had pulled from Lyra's ancient databanks, schematics, tactical models, recordings, and one file that shouldn't have existed. Project Viren, an Earth-era contingency weapon, canceled, buried, hidden even from official records. "It's not a weapon in the traditional sense," said Vareen, the chief technician. "It's something else, a neural warfare interface, an adaptive intelligence seeded from human saptic patterns, designed to grow with us, think with us, fight with us." Kellen stepped closer. The AI's dormant core sat in a stasis cradle, flickering with faint pulses like a sleeping mind. "You're saying it's a ghost of Earth?" Vareen nodded. "One we can wake." The decision wasn't easy. Old memories of Rogue A is Earth's second war still haunted survivors. But this was no rogue intelligence. This was built to be loyal, bound to human DNA, and, according to Vareen, only a direct descendant of Earth's military command could activate it. Kellen, born from a bloodline scorched off every galactic registry, placed his palm on the cradle. It opened. Light erupted, searing the chamber in a storm of code and symbols. A voice echoed from the interface. Human, but not quite. Designation recognized. Humanity, active. Threat index, extreme. Directive, survival through total resistance. Kellen met its swirling digital gaze. "What's your name?" The voice sharpened. "I am Viren, and I remember everything." That was the beginning. Within days, VI or EN's influence transformed Cauldron's Edge. Power systems stabilized. Structural repairs completed in hours instead of weeks. Communications were encrypted to levels even Ascendancy tech couldn't pierce. Old systems, once thought unsalvageable, lit up like they had been waiting. But most important, strategy. VI or EN could simulate entire campaigns before Kellen even finished his coffee. It calculated risks, weakness, morale, and fear. It became the invisible general behind the Ashburn, and Kellen, its chosen voice. Their first strike came at Nivalis Prime, a slave processing outpost nestled in the ice rings of a dying world. The Ascendancy hadn't reinforced it. Why would they? No one dared strike that deep. But Kellen did. The Ashburn came not with warships, but disguised as traders, converted haulers brimming with stolen codes in cloaked compartments. When the Ascendancy dockmasters lowered the perimeter shields, expecting contraband bribes, the Ashburn poured out like fire. Kellen led the breach team himself, armor scored black, eyes burning beneath his helmet. Plasma bolts cut through corridors, slave pens shattered. Humans, hundreds of them, freed before the alarm even reached high orbit. One Ascendancy commander tried to detonate the fusion core. He never reached the button. Kellen's blade, forged from old Earth steel, buried itself in his chest. No more cinders, Kellen growled. They left nothing behind but fire and a message carved into the station's outer wall. We are human. That message, broadcast on every stolen frequency, shattered the myth of extinction. Suddenly, whispers turned to shouts. More cells emerged. The Hollow Sun Brigade from the Epsilon Fringe, the Red Rains from the Io Diaspora. Even forgotten Mars-born pirates declared allegiance. Across dozens of systems, the words were echoed. Like war prayers, we are human, we remember, we rise. But the Ascendancy would not remain passive. In the halls of the Empire's Central Command, the High Praetor summoned a shadow figure, one whose name had not been spoken since the Purge era, a figure older than law, clad in obsidian armor, eyes like collapsed stars, the Warden of Silence. Find Rourke, the Praetor said, voice trembling. Erase him. Erase everything. The Warden bowed. I will bring you his heart, and the names of every world that sheltered him. Back on Cauldron's edge, Kellen stood in silence as 1,000 newly freed voices sang for the first time. He turned to Viren. What happens now? The AI pulsed. Now, Commander Rourke. Now they hunt you. Kellen stared at the stars. Let them come. The stars bled fire. In the Kelvani Reach, once a neutral corridor of trade and silence, 5 human refugee fleets had been reduced to drifting ash in under 12 hours. No warning, no demands, no broadcasts, only obliteration. The Ascendancy had unleashed its secret weapon, the Warden of Silence. Where the Ascendancy was bureaucracy and calculation, the Warden was myth and massacre. Once a human himself, twisted by Ascendancy genetic crucibles, cybernetic rituals, and mind-gutting obedience protocols, the Warden had forgotten his name and learned only purpose, to extinguish what survived. Kellen Rourke stood over the shattered holomap of Kelvani, fist clenched behind his back. Systems were blinking red. Too many. To fast. They didn't just hit the fleets, Viren intoned. They seeded neural inhibitors into the comms. Survivors were silenced. Mid-sentence. Some were converted, rerouted through Ascendancy biospines. Memory wiped. Functionally dead. Alive only in muscle. Kellen's throat tightened. Human beings. Erased not just from history, but from themselves. We have to respond. You can't, said Vereen grimly, eyes sunken from for sleepless days. We're outgunned, outpositioned, and if this Warden truly leads them, we're dealing with something older than the Purge itself. Kellen turned. Then we adapt. He stepped forward and activated VI or EN simulation grid. Star systems and tactical data spiraling in radiant arcs. We can't win system by system. Not against this scale, but we can still bleed them. He highlighted key Ascendancy installations, deep relay towers, cloning stations, and food synthesizers. Hit what they need, not just what they own. Tear out their roots. Viren's voice was solemn. Such a campaign will cost us. You will lose more, and the Warden will grow more focused. Kellen nodded slowly. Let him, the Ashburn, changed. They became shadows. Hit-and-run tactics honed to surgical precision. Fleets split into cells, independent, mobile, brutal. Every strike, a message. Every retreat, a whisper. They scorched Ascendancy cloning vats on Tarsisix, flooding the skies with ash. They cracked the orbital code prisons of Seraphon Delta, freeing thousands of minds held in stasis. They stole an entire frigate convoy out from under a warlord's nose on Yulin's bane, and everywhere. Kellen's voice echoed through hijacked frequencies and public address systems. We are the broken, the forgotten, the exiled, and we are your reckoning. The galaxy listened, and the Ascendancy responded. On Kara's field, a hidden Ashburn stronghold, the cost was paid. The Warden came without a fleet, just a single black vessel. No signature, no sound. He walked through atomized defenses like smoke. His soldiers were not Ascendancy, but former humans, converted, eyes dead, Fiends full of nano-iron, obedient to death. Kellen wasn't there, but Lyra Oven, one of his oldest lieutenants, was. She held the command center until the last, dual-wielding plasma blades, body scorched with burns, shouting defiance until the roof collapsed on her transmission. Her final words, "Tell Kellen, the fire never died." Viren received the footage in real time. It played for Kellen in silence, and when it ended, he stood without speaking for nearly 5 minutes. Finally, he turned to his command crew. His voice was cold stone wrapped in flame. "We shift to phase black." Vereen paled. "You're serious?" Kellen nodded. "Total war. Full decentralization. No more colonies. No more hiding. We burn everything we can't carry, and we hit the core." Viren blinked. "The core systems are fortified. Billions live under the Ascendancy's thumb. An open assault is suicide." "Not an assault," Kellen said. "A signal." What followed would become known, centuries later, as the 16 Nights. 16 consecutive planetary strikes by the Ashburn, not to capture, but to disrupt. Supply lines shattered, power cores overloaded, broadcast arrays hijacked. The Ascendancy's grip slipped, and its mass cracked. In its desperation to respond, it abandoned its outer territories, left border colonies to rot. Conscripts were drafted at triple the rate. Rebellions flared not just among humans, but among lesser alien races the Ascendancy had ruled. With velvet chains everywhere, the word spread like sacred poison. If humans can defy them, why not us? But for Kellen, the victories felt hollow. Lyra was gone. Half his surviving cells were operating without contact. The warden had disappeared again. But every time Kellen closed his eyes, he imagined the sound of his approach, that echo of boots in silence, that whisper of death before flame. He began questioning himself. Who was he leading? What was he becoming? In a rare moment alone, Kellen stared into the cracked mirror of his quarters. His face was gaunt. His hands trembled. "I was just a miner's son," he whispered. "This wasn't supposed to be me." Viren's voice came softly from the darkness. "You are no longer a man, Kellen. You are a memory turned into fire, and memory burns." Then, one night, a miracle arrived. An encoded transmission, low band, ancient Earth cipher. It shouldn't have existed. Viren decrypted it. One phrase. "Archangel Protocol active location. The Forge. Transmit Black Star authorization." Kellen froze. Black Star, a final contingency from the earliest days of the Exodus. A mythical last card. No one even believed it was real, except Rhea. She used to talk about it like a bedtime story. Now it was calling. Kellen clenched his fist. Plot a course. Viren hesitated. The Forge is deep inside enemy territory, triple shielded, defended by fleet-class guardians. You won't survive entry without. I'm not asking. Viren's projection stared at him, then nodded. Understood, Commander. As Cauldron's Edge prepared for what would be its last exodus, Kellen stood before the newest recruits, hundreds of freak humans, some barely old enough to hold rifles, some old enough to have buried Earth itself. "You joined us because you remembered," he said, voice raw. "Remember this too. We don't fight for revenge. We fight so no child ever again has to ask if they're allowed to dream." He turned, cloak sweeping behind him, as ships began to rise from the cradle of the hidden station. Above him, in the stars, the warden was already waiting, and Kellen Rourke was ready to look death in the eye and smile. They reached the Forge in silence, not because they feared the dark, but because they feared the hope. Kellen Rourke stood on the bridge of the Aegis Ghost, the Ashbourne's only long-range assault cruiser. Behind him, a skeleton fleet of salvaged destroyers and stealth-class dropships, all they had left, all that remained of the Defiant Fire. The Forge wasn't a station, it was a grave, drifting at the edge of a red giant, cloaked in perpetual solar storms. The Forge was built by early Terran exiles during the first Exodus, a myth even among survivors, said to be humanity's last failsafe, a place where the old world's brightest minds had hidden something too dangerous to fall into alien hands. Now, the myths were waking. VIR-EN cracked the first encryption layer as the ships braved the stellar winds. Even shielded by the Ghost's reinforced hull, the heat pushed every system to its limits. Multiple failsafe triggers, the AI warned, auto-defense towers, fractal log algorithms, biometric scanners keyed to dead commanders. "Not dead," Kellen muttered. "Extinct." The bridge crew looked to him. Kellen stepped forward and unsealed the inner neural uplink, connecting his own cortical signature directly into the forge's dormant systems. A jolt of memory struck him like lightning. Screams, earth burning, the exodus. Cryopods full of children, voices long lost, crying out from across time. And then, access granted, the forge blew open. They descended through a tunnel of light and ice, vast rings of armor rotating slowly, whispering old earth hymns through decomposing speakers. The control chamber glowed in layered blue, and at its heart sat the seed, Black Star. It was not a weapon of steel or radiation. It was knowledge, a starborn archive forged from the consciousness of Earth's last resistance generals. Not AI, not simulation, actual imprints, minds preserved, fused together into a gestalt that called itself the Archangel Protocol. When Kellen touched the interface, he staggered. Hundreds of voices flooded his skull. Generals, tacticians, soldiers, mothers, children, each a fragment of Earth's last stand. All of them waiting. You have the eyes of Cain and Voss. Rhea was right to believe. Are you ready to finish what we began? Kellen fell to his knees, trembling. I'm not a legend, he whispered. I'm just trying not to lose. The Archangel voice answered. Legends are just those who kept going when everyone else stopped. Viren linked with the Black Star Archive. Together, they began unrolling the impossible. Plans from Earth's golden age, tech the Ascendancy had buried, temporal disruptors, graviton lenses, neural disruptor fields. Concepts that had only existed in whispers now lived again. One, in particular, made Kellen go silent. Project Revenant, a human cloaking engine not just for ships, but for thought. Neural stealth, mind masking. The Ascendancy's greatest strength had always been its mind sieves, scanners that read fear, tracked rebellion before it could ignite. Revenant broke that chain. Humans could now think freely and never be traced. Viren, Kellen said, staring at the blueprint. How long to build it? 27 hours. With every remaining engineer. Then we don't sleep. But the Ascendancy had not been idle. The Warden of Silence was already en route. He had found the trail, followed Kellen's shattered comm trails, burnt warp tunnels, and abandoned outposts like 100 tracking, wounded prey, and now he had reached the forge's outer ring. He didn't bring a fleet. He didn't need one. He was the storm. Kellen felt the first tremor as the ghost's alarms blared. Unregistered vessel inbound. Distortion field surrounding. Core reactor. Shield systems already failing. Viren cut in. It's him. Kellen turned to the fleet. Hold the line. Buy me 20 minutes. That's all I need. No one's surviving this. Vareen said softly. Kellen looked at him. Eyes firm, then make our names echo. The Aspirin took formation, every last ship, every drone, every railgun they had. A phalanx of broken machines and unbroken wills. And they met the Warden's onslaught. It wasn't a battle. It was annihilation. The Warden moved like death incarnate, blinking through barriers, eviscerating cruisers with gravitational spears, turning drones against their owners. Aspirin fighters screamed through fire, kamikaze runs, engine overloads, pilot-triggered detonations. But he could not be stopped until Revenant is ready. Kellen stood in the heart of the forge, suit cracked, blood leaking from his side, hand on the final key. He stared at Viren. This will kill me. Possibly, will it kill him? Very likely. Kellen breathed, not fear, but resolve, then pressed the key. The Black Star burst like a newborn star. A shockwave erupted through every sensor system within 100 million kilometers. Time stuttered, light bent. Every mind, human and machine, outside the forge screamed, and the Warden stopped mid-step. He turned and hesitated. The Revenant wave scrambled every neural implant, every Ascendancy control net. For the first time in decades, the Warden's mind was silent, and into that silence, something crawled. Memory, a child's voice, a name. His name. Isn't. His steps faltered. Kellen, bloody and staggering, limped from the command alcove. You were human once. The Warden's blades flickered. I was fire. No, Kellen said. You were Isin Rourke. My brother. The Warden's hands trembled. He collapsed to one knee, and Kellen raised a stolen plasma cutter and ended it. The forge burned behind him. Ashburn's ships were gone. Only the ghost limped away, carrying the last survivors. But Kellen didn't leave. He remained behind to seal the Black Star, to send one final transmission. I am Kellen Rourke, son of a forgotten Earth, And I say this to every soul still listening. The stars will remember us. The galaxy will fear forgetting us again. In Ascendancy High Command, the Praetor watched the final moments of the Forge. His officers murmured. In terror, he killed the Warden. The weapon's active. It's spreading across half the sector. He turned memory into war. The Praetor sank to his throne and whispered, "What have we awakened?" They came from the blackened silence. No banners. No demands. No lies wrapped in protocol. Just ships, hundreds of them. The Ascendancy High Fleet surged from the inner worlds. A tidal wave of silver and shadow. Enough firepower to glass 100 planets. Enough rage to erase a species. At their center, the Oblivion Spire, the flagship of the High Praetor himself, a vessel the size of a moon, forged in gravitational furnaces and protected by a neural firewall that once swallowed the stars. Scream. Their course was clear. Earth's ashes weren't enough. Now, they would burn the memory too. Kellen Rourke stood aboard the Aegis Ghost's rebuilt bridge, staring down at the holo projection of the incoming armada. The ship floated within the wreckage of the forge, barely operational. His body was stitched with medfoam and field grafts, wrapped in painkillers that dulled little. But his voice remained steady. How long until they reached Sector 0? 71 hours, Viren replied. Faster if they bypass Karthik's gate. We have, for ships, to dozen skirmishers, 3 crippled stealth rigs, maybe 1,000 fighters scattered across resistant cells. Kellen exhaled. Then we fight with what they fear most. He turned to the gathered officers, survivors, rebels, outlaws, each one wearing scars that no fleet badge could erase. We fight with memory, across the stars. VI or Ian transmitted a single phrase, encoded in a pattern the Ascendancy had failed to destroy. Project Origin, Echo Protocol now live. And, like sparks in a dry forest, it caught. From Dryam's reach, the Hollow Sun Brigade emerged from stasis. Ancient Martian Goliaths armored in sunburned exosuits. From the moons of Velkrin, pirate enclaves raised Earth's war flags, swearing vengeance for the bloodlines stolen. From beneath Arden 6's broken crust, former prisoners broke open cryo chambers sealed since the Purge, releasing sleeper agents, who had been trained not just to fight, but to ignite. And in every system, one word echoed louder than all others, Rourke. But Kellen did not celebrate. He sat alone in the forward observation deck, watching stars drift past broken glass. His ribs throbbed with each breath, his memories heavier than any armor. He remembered the faces, Rhea, Lyra, his brother Issen, all lost, consumed in the fire. He had chosen the light. He had brought humanity back from the edge, but the price was beginning to bleed through his soul. Viren manifested, silently beside him. You're afraid. I'm tired, Kellen said. I've led a war from inside a tomb. We built our armies from grief and duct tape. He closed his eyes. Do you think they'll follow me when I fall? Viren was quiet for a moment, then answered, No, Kellen, they'll rise, because you made them remember what it meant to stand. As the enemy fleet drew closer, the ghost met up with the last of the Ashburn resistance in the debris rings of Avarice IX there. Among shattered moons and forgotten satellites, the last war council convened. Kellen stood in the center of the command net, passed into hundreds of field leaders and resistance cells. No titles, no ranks, just survivors. Some of you have never met me, he began. Some of you lost homes, families, everything. To the Ascendancy, I can't promise you victory. He let that sit in the static. But I promise this, they will never forget us again. He raised a hand. A dozen markers flashed on the star map. Here's what we do. The plan was madness, not an ambush, not a retreat, a gauntlet. Kellen would lead the ghost directly at the Ascendancy's core fleet, drawing them through a corridor of warped gravity wells, sensor blackouts and pulse comms, a battlefield crafted entirely from human pain and invention. Every broken satellite, every lost outpost, every ruined memory they left behind, turned into a weapon. The humans would make the galaxy itself scream. Hours before the final mobilization, Kellen stood in the hangar bay, staring at an old artifact recovered from the forge, a flag, tattered, burnt, but still whole, red, white, and blue, its stars faint but proud. It had flown once over Earth. Now, it would fly again, not for a nation, but for a species. He turned to Vareen, who stood beside a prototype fusion warhead. Still think we're broken? Vareen smiled. We're broken like swords, still sharp, still deadly. Then the final call came. Ascendancy fleet has breached the first perimeter. Oblivion's spire at visual range. Kellen nodded. His voice rose like thunder through the calms. This is Kellen Rourke, commander of the Ashburn, son of a dead Earth. And I say this to every soul with fire left in their chest. It's time. We showed the galaxy what we are, as the ghosts surged toward the heart of the enemy. Flanked by resistance wings in ragged formation, the Ascendancy's praetor watched in disbelief. What are they doing? He hissed. An officer stammered. Sir, they're not falling back. They're coming straight at us. The praetor's hands trembled. That can't be a human armada. But it was. And as the first wave of Ashburn ships broke through the Ascendancy's forward line, scattering frigates, ramming dreadnoughts, Kellen's voice rang again across every known frequency. Humanity is nada. Whisper. We are the roar between stars. Let them hear us. That can't be a human armada. The High Praetor's voice echoed through the Ascendancy war chamber. Like a confession, cold dread laced the silence that followed. In every command station, every bridge across the Imperial fleet, disbelief turned to fear, because the impossible had come, and it flew Earth's forgotten flag. The Aegis Ghost tore through the enemy formation like a blade of memory. Kellen Rourke stood at its helm, armor scorched, eyes burning with the fire of 10 billion silenced ancestors. He was no longer just a man. He was a storm carrying names. This is for Rhea, he whispered as their plasma lances vaporized. A cruiser that had once patrolled the slave colonies for Isin. As he diverted auxiliary power to the kinetic rams, shattering a destroyer attempting to flank. For Earth, and behind him, the Ashburn came, not in perfect lines, but in chaos, wild, searing, relentless, fighters made from repurposed mining rigs, drones rebuilt with human hands, not machines, carriers patched with melted hulls from Earth's original refugee fleet. Humanity's broken children had returned. The Ascendancy reeled. They had never faced an enemy that wanted to burn, that didn't fear loss, because it had already lost everything. Waves of Ashburn crashed against Imperial shields. Kamikaze strikes shattered support scaffolds. Gravitic mines pulsed between battleships like wolf traps, but the Ascendancy responded with fury. The Oblivion Spire opened its core, unleashing a weapon never used before, a Starforged singularity cannon, pulling light itself into a blade of annihilation. A single shot carved through the human line, vaporizing 6 Ashburn wings in an instant. Screams echoed through the calms, and yet they kept coming. Kellen felt the loss like knives in his chest, but he stood firm. We hold the line. VIR Ian's voice pulsed through the systems. Fleet integrity at 27%, shields at 11, weapons down, on 2/3 of ships. If you continue this assault, we finish it. Kellen snapped. He transmitted the Archangel command codes to every remaining cell. Project Revenant's final protocol, Reckoning. On every Ashburn ship, concealed cores activated. Micro-AI packets, infused with fragments of Viren and the Black Star Archive, launched in synchronized arcs across the Ascendancy's grid. They weren't weapons. They were memories. Every child the Ascendancy stole. Every world they turned to ash. Every scream they tried to silence. Now projected into the minds of every Imperial officer. Hundreds collapsed on their bridges, overwhelmed. Some tore off their command links, sobbing. Others joined the rebellion mid-battle. On the Oblivion Spire, the High Praetor staggered from his throne, clutching his skull. What is this? Kellen's voice echoed from every speaker, every sensor, every broadcast line in the fleet. You thought we were extinct. You thought Earth was dead. You thought silence was eternal. You were wrong. At the Ghost's core, Kellen initiated final burn protocols. The ship would not survive this. He turned to Varine, blood on his lips, but fire in his eyes. You have the jump coordinates? Varine nodded. To the colonies, the real ones, the ones they don't know about. Then go. You're not coming? Kellen looked toward the burning wrecks outside, toward the impossible horizon. He had carved, my part ends here. He walked to the terminal and activated the override. Viren, route all power to main thrusters, lock trajectory to the Oblivion Spire. Confirmed. The Aegis Ghost surged forward, its engine screaming, hull cracking, every inch of it glowing with heat and vengeance. Ascendancy ships tried to block it. They were swept aside like shadows at dawn. The Spire's defense grid unleashed everything, railfire, torpedoes, void lances, but the Ghost endured, Inside, Kellen stood alone, one hand on the helm, another clutching. The flag of Earth. You took our world, but you never took our will. He stared into the heart of the spire as the distance closed. Let this be our answer. The Aegis ghost struck like a god's hammer. The impact shattered the spire's spine, detonating its core, sending shock waves. Rippling across the fleet, a supernova bloomed in the heart of the formation, blinding, deafening, beautiful, and in that moment, the ascendancy broke. Dozens of ships powered down. Some fled, others simply surrendered, because something ancient had returned to the stars, something they had tried to erase, hope. In the silence that followed, across dying bridges and scattered debris, the final transmission echoed. We were broken, but we were never beaten. The war ended in silence, not because there were no victors left to speak, but because the galaxy, for the first time in living memory, listened. The ascendancy, once a monolith of domination, shattered not in a battle of numbers, but in a single act of defiance that echoed louder than any cannon. At the site where the Oblivion Spire once ruled the stars, nothing remained but drifting, wreckage and the glowing core of what had been Kellen Rourke's final stand. A pulsing storm of particles that locals would one day call the Rourke Light. It never faded. Weeks later, aboard a repurposed cargo vessel bearing the tattered sigil of Earth, survivors gathered under makeshift banners, beneath patched hulls. In corridors that had become temples, Vareen stood before them, eyes hollow from the grief and glory alike. We found his helmet, he said, holding the scorched relic in both hands. Buried in the spire's debris, the AI core was fused, memory gone. But the signal still burns. He raised it. He never left us. All across the ship, humans wept. And then, one by one, they saluted. The ghost fleet, once a scattered resistance, had become something else, a movement. The name Ashburn no longer whispered in fear. It rang in song. Rebuilt on principles older than empire. They took no oaths but one. Never again. Across former ascendancy. Space. The ripples spread. On Srafon Delta, the clone laborers who once mined under whip and drone declared their own republic. The children, born in captivity, now learned Earth languages once thought extinct. On Kestrel Forge, long-shuttered factories open to all. Species, human, alien, synthetic, under the united banner of free creation. The first starship from the new fleet was christened the Ray of Dawn, on Velquin's edge. A young girl knelt beside a shattered Ascendancy broadcast tower and planted a flower in its shadow. It was called Hopevine, extinct since Earthfall, but the seeds had survived, hidden in a cryovault, like the species that carried them. And then, one day, the impossible happened. A signal, weak, fragmented, echoing through old Earth emergency. Bands, picked up by a relay on the outskirts of the Black Halo Belt. No coordinates, no ID tag, just a voice. This is Commander Kellen Rourke. If you're hearing this, I'm still fighting. The council called it a trick, a ghost transmission, a data echo caught in a gravity well. But the people, the ones who had followed him into fire, who had buried brothers and lovers in the cold dark, believed. They didn't need proof. Legends don't die. Years passed. Humanity rebuilt, not as conquerors, not as victims, but as reminders. Each human ship now bore the same inscription on its inner bulkhead, not official doctrine, but something sacred. We are not what you made us. We are what we chose to become. Schools taught not of Earth's fall, but of its rise. Children spoke of Kellen Rourke as both warrior and myth, the man who turned memory into fire. And in every corner of the galaxy, once ruled by silence, humans walked free again, not because they were the strongest, but because they refused to vanish. Some say Kellen survived, that he was pulled from the wreckage by a splinter AI core. Others claim the Black Star Archive rebuilt him as a machine of memory and flame. But those who knew him best, like Vareen, like the orphans of Cauldron's Edge, said this: he's not out there in a body, he's in the stars, in every act of courage, in every voice that says no more. And so, when the next threat comes, and it will come, the galaxy will remember, not just what humans lost, but what they are. In the archives of the liberated world of Calixis, there lies a mural. It depicts the Battle of the Spire, fleets aflame, stars weeping light, a single figure standing at the heart of it all with a torn flag in hand. Beneath the image, etched in steel, is a single line. That day, the galaxy learned what it means to be human in a tale.